Hello again. Welcome to A Brave Service, which is my blog, whatever you want to call it, about my research efforts with the 3rd Battalion, 12th Infantry Regiment, which was a infantry battalion that served in Vietnam between 1966 and 1970. My connection to that unit is through my wife's uncle, who was a medic in Delta Company in that battalion. Again, that's the 3rd to the 12th. And he was actually killed in action in May 8th of 1968. And in my quest to figure out more about his story, it really has opened up a whole world of research to me. And I'd like to just be able to bring some of that to all of you. All right, so for today's video, it's not going to be as long as the last one. I think that was really much too long, and really I want to focus in on something, and it's maps. And if you watch the last video, you'll see that basically what I was doing was manipulating a map, and it was a Vietnam era map, and I had taken a snippet of it and thrown it in PowerPoint, and was kind of manipulating based on the unit record of where they were that day, trying to answer a question. Well, I'm going to back it up just a little bit and not get in depth into one specific event, but I want to cover a couple of items that came to me from the family member of a veteran of the 3rd of the 12th. So I'll start back in October of 2020. My son Micah and I took a trip to Texas from Alaska, which is where we lived at the time, to visit the grave sites of 10 3rd of the 12th veterans that were killed in Vietnam. And this is a trip that I had planned. COVID had kind of happened and canceled my trip to the archives, and I needed something else to do kind of in the meantime. And Texas was one of the few states that would allow you to visit. And so we took off and we figured, well, we're just going to be going to a bunch of cemeteries. So it's not like we're going to be interacting with a lot of people, but we did interact with some people. And one of the people that we interacted with was a woman named Shannon. And her father, like I mentioned, served in the 3rd of the 12th. He actually served in Delta Company at the same time as my wife's uncle. So we don't know for certain that they knew each other or met. It's highly likely that they did. Shannon's dad, Larry Mac McGee was his name, held a position for a while in the supply section of the company. So a lot of the new soldiers, I'm sure, would have run through him to get gear. And as a medic, he would have, my uncle would have known who he was at the very least. Anyway, unfortunately, Mac passed away in 2010, and so I was never able to meet him or ask him these questions. But when I scheduled this trip to Texas, I knew that Shannon lived in Houston, and we were going to be passing through there because there was a cemetery in Houston that we wanted to visit. So I sent her a message and I said, hey, if you're willing to, if you want to meet up, we'd like to meet up. And so we met and we had an amazing visit. And she showed me a bunch of items that her father had kept, pictures that he'd taken, and we established a really good friendship, and we still have a great friendship now. And so fast forward to this past year, 2022, and my family and I traveled to Columbus, Georgia for a Delta Company 3rd of the 12th, the reunion, the first one we'd been able to attend. And it was amazing. And while we were there, Shannon handed me this plastic baggie. And I remember I saw this, I think, in Houston back in 2020. But we had just kind of formed our relationship, and I didn't take anything from her or ask for anything, but she brought this to this reunion last year, and she said, Mark, I want you, take these maps and try and get some digital copies made of them. Now, I don't have a scanner that big, but I have a company here that I work with that could probably scan something as big as one of these maps. Now, folded up, they're pretty small, but you extend them to their full size, and they're about 24 by 30. So a regular scanner that you have in your house isn't going to work. So anyway, that's what I'm going to focus on is these two maps. These maps are incredible because these are the maps that her dad carried in Vietnam in 1967 and 68, although based on his tour and what we know about it, I don't think he had these in the 67 portion. Basically, Mac's story, real quickly, um, he arrived in Vietnam in September of 67, was assigned to Delta Company, and even though he was trained as a mortarman, he was put in a line platoon, which many of the mortarmen were. They needed infantrymen; they didn't need as many mortarmen. Um, and he, in November of 67, was wounded in the Battle of Dak To, a fairly famous battle. And if you look it up, there's tons of information about it. Well, Delta Company and the rest of the Third and 12th was assaulting this Hill 1338, which is this giant hill complex, mountain complex south of Dak To. And anyway, he had his finger shot off, and so by a sniper that was aiming his head. So he was very lucky to be alive. Um, and anyway, so I don't think he had these maps on him. He's pretty new to the unit at that point. He wasn't in a leadership position. I don't even know like what happened to his stuff after he was wounded. Sometimes guys lost all that stuff that they had on him. Anyway, what happened is then he recovers from this wound. He goes and he works in the Delta Company supply section in Dak To for a while, and then at the end of May, Delta Company gets involved in a horrendous battle, and they lose a ton of guys. 6 killed, 50 something wounded. I mean, they lost a lot of guys, and Mac volunteered to go back in the field because he was experienced. He'd been there for a while, and he knew they needed help. Um, and so I think these maps are from that period, from June, July, August, September, which is when he was back in the field with Delta Company. Um, and and he actually was in a leadership like a squad leader type role, um, and I think for a while acting platoon sergeant. So he would have had a reason to have these maps. Not every soldier had maps, but Mac certainly did, and we know he had them because obviously they made their way into Shannon's hands after he passed away. And these maps are pretty special because they have actual markings on them from the patrol routes that Mac either led or was a part of um, during that June, July, August, very beginning of September timeframe, like the first couple of days of September, and then he was out of there. Um, so we're just going to talk about those maps. There's a lot we could talk about as far as Mac goes, and I'm sure we'll dive back into his story at certain points. But let's just focus on the maps. All right, before we get into Max maps, I just want to kind of give a brief overview on what these are. So the entire world in the military grid reference system mapping system, the entire world is broken up into these boxes, um, big boxes, and then smaller boxes, and even smaller boxes. And eventually, you get down to a 1 to 50,000 meter uh, set of grid squares, and that is a map sheet. And so these are two map sheets. And I've got my computer open here to the Texas Tech um, Vietnam Archive, which is an amazing resource, and I encourage you to go and explore. They've got lots of things. People have donated their personal collections to it. They have this, which I think is one of their most valuable assets. And you can actually go here, and if you know the map sheet that you're looking for, you can find it and actually just click on one of these little squares, and it will open up, and you can download it to your computer free of charge. It downloads as a PDF. It's what I've used, um, and I continue to use it. All right, so here's the maps. I took them out of the plastic bag and snapped a picture of them, and as you can see, they're still folded, and this is likely the folds that Mac put them in back in 1968. Um, and there's two different maps. We'll focused mostly on this one on the right, which is the Dak Mot Lop map sheet, 6538-3. You can see that right here. If you remember, and I'll drop the link for the Texas Tech Vietnam Archive. I'll drop the link in. but those are referenced by this number, a number like this, 65383 is this one's number, and so that's what you're kind of looking for if you know the map sheet, or or if you know you have a loved one that served and is like, hey, I want to know where's the map sheets from where I served. Maybe they know the general location, and then you can bring them and show them that map, and then click on the right, the general location. It's going to take some sleuthing if they don't know where, but usually the name of the map sheet is the largest, population center on the map, and so Dak Mot Lop is the one that we're going to focus on. This other one on the left is Dak To, which is a very common and very important map for the battalion. But there's no writing on it. Mac didn't put any patrol routes on it, so um, I can't tell. I mean, they operated in that area, and for certain, he spent time there because he lived on Dak To while he was in the supply section. But he wasn't running patrols, etc. So he might have had Dak To because it is the bordering map sheet. Basically, Dak Mot Lop is on the left or west side, and then you go one map sheet over, and you've got Dak To. So we're going to focus on Dak Mot Lop, which is this one kind of folded up right here. It's interesting. The Dak To one is folded perfectly. I think that you would slide it in like a back pocket, or maybe like the breast pocket on your fatigue shirt. It's the Dak Mot Lop is folded a little bit wider. So we'll dig into these. Okay, so this is the Dak Mot Lop map sheet, but this is not Max. I just wanted to show you the comparison between. This is the PDF version that I pulled off the the Texas Tech archive, uh, and you can see the white borders. It's nice and crisp. Um, this, I don't know. I'm sure this was actually a paper map that was scanned in at some point, but this was like an unused, unfolded version of it. And so I'm just going to close this out, and Mac's map is right behind it. So you're going to kind of get to see the worn look. So this is Mac's. You can see already the stark color difference. There's this red tinged stain all over it, and this is because in the central highlands of Vietnam and many places of Vietnam, the dirt had this reddish color in it, and it just got everywhere. So all the guys, that I've talked to, they all remember the red dirt, and it just stained their boots and their fatigues and their maps. And so you can see the fold marks are in this, pretty significantly. Um, and you can see these pen marks, or I'm not sure if it's, I mean, if this is blue, and there's another one that's black, and there's even one that's kind of a red. So I think they're pen marks, but they might be oil pens, because there's some old, like kind of faded ones, and I'll zoom in a little bit. But first, I just want to give you like an overview of this map. 55 years old, and it's pretty amazing. I brought it to this local blueprint shop, Morgantown Blueprint. They are an amazing company. They do a lot of printing for me, and I knew they had the capability to scan, but I wasn't sure how big, and so I brought the maps to them, and they took care of it. They made these very good scans, didn't damage the maps, the originals at all, and so now I can get the originals back to Shannon, and I'll have these digital copies. So again, you can see the map folds. So just kind of going down, and so you can also the scan. You can see there is wear all around this document, folds, creases, cuts, tears. I mean, this was used in the field for quite a while. Bent, and actually the Dak To one has some like more significant damage than this one. So I want to just show you a couple of things that I found pretty cool. So in the legend, you get to see the map information, and so this map information is as of 1965. The digital version that I have that I got from the Texas Tech Archive is, I believe, and now I can't remember, I believe it's 1970. Um, and so they reprinted these maps every, few years, and especially during Vietnam, there was a lot happening in the country. Maybe not as much out here as far as infrastructure, those kind of changes, but there was a lot going on. And so these were printed in 1965, and you can see right here um, the seal. I'll zoom in so you can really get a good look at it. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Army Map Service, which interestingly enough in 1965 was a thing, but by the time they reprinted these in 1970 and 1968 even, um, the Army Map Service had gone away. It had been folded up into a different branch of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They changed their name. I think it's to the U.S. Army Topographic Service, and then U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Or these maps then were also being approved by the Department of Defense, and their stamp is on the later versions of these maps. But for these ones, it's just this really cool Army Map Service, and you can see the traditional castle, which is a very traditional symbol of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Army engineering in general. All right, so we'll get out of there. Um, and there is a couple of differences between the 1965 version and the later version, which is available online. And the most significant one on this map is right here. In this little kind of crook of the road here of Highway 512, there's nothing. Well, there's this little encampment or, whatever, we don't know. It's just, something to symbolize that there's something there. But when Mac was here in 1968, Ben Het Special Forces Camp was right here. And on the later version of this map, it is actually uh, it's present. And I'll just pop that up real quick. I guess I didn't. I got rid of my map. Let's pull it up. We'll zoom into that same spot. I just noticed another really major difference that I'll get to. You can see here there's a heliport, and this is Ben Het Special Forces Camp. So this heliport was not there in 1965. What's interesting is look at this road. I just noticed this. Highway 512 ends, and a lot of the guys that I've talked to, they remember that the kind of the main highway, this, I say it's a highway, it wasn't like this, multi-lane highway. This was still pretty much a dirt road, but it kind of ended and became trails. Well, the 1965 version, go back to it, has Highway 512 continuing all the way into Laos. So I'll have to research. I don't know what the story about that is. Was this a road that it went away, once the Vietnam War started? Is this in 1965? Was this just a planned road that didn't actually exist yet? But then, uh, when the war really broke out in earnest, in 65, I mean, I think that's really when things kind of really ballooned up for the Americans. Um, that this road just fell away. It's kind of a mystery in and of itself. All right, so that was the map sheet that I really wanted to share. Is this amazing artifact of Mac's that is now Shannon's, and she's entrusted it with me, and now we have a digital copy we can have forever. I guess one thing I do want to show is just to give you some perspective on where is that map sheet in the world. I'll use Google Earth. I love Google Earth, and I've actually got an add-on that breaks it into the larger grid squares. Remember I said the whole world is broken up into squares. So 49, you can kind of come in here, 48 Quebec, 49 Quebec, 49 Papa, and 48 Quebec, or 48 Papa, I'm sorry, are the four chunks of the world that Vietnam, both North and South Vietnam, and now Vietnam as one country, exist in. Um, and so you got to know that, that information is actually on each map sheet as well. So the Dak Mot Lop, where is that one? Okay, so we know where Vietnam is in the world. I just showed you it's in Southeast Asia. So we got Vietnam stretching, long north to south. The Central Highlands really encompassed kind of this area here. It was 2 Corps, which was the military designator. Um, I Corps or First Corps was up the northernmost, and then Second Corps, Third Corps, and Fourth Corps was down in the south of the country. But our map sheet, just to show you perspective of how much ground one map sheet covers, is this little square. I've built it in there using the grid coordinates, and you can kind of really get in. You can see the city of Kontum is down here, and here is our map sheet. That's what it covers, this amount of ground. And we can use our little ruler here, and we're going to measure this in kilometers. Actually, sorry, I clicked wrong. And that's basically about 27 kilometers wide by, I'll cut it short just a little, by about 28 kilometers. 27, it's about 27 by 27, 28, 27 by 27. It's kind of a square. Well, it is a square. Everything's supposed to be square, so it's about 27 by 27 um, kilometers. So what is that in miles? Let's just throw that into miles. Um, that's about 17 and a half miles north to south and east to west. So that's it. This is our map sheet that we're looking at in Google Earth, and you can see some of the same areas. The same areas represented like we saw on the map sheet. The tri-border area, of course, is the most evident. Is Laos to the northwest, Cambodia to the southwest, and then Vietnam here to the east. And Dak To is on the Dak To map sheet, which is one map sheet over. And so you can kind of imagine, and I didn't build this one, but probably goes to about here and then up. So there'd be this other map sheet is Dak To. So that's what it looks like in comparison to the rest of the world. What we're looking at, this one map sheet. All right, I do want to show you the other map sheet that I just mentioned, Dak To. Again, it's one map sheet to the east, and this is the PDF version that I got from the Texas Tech Archive, nice and clean and bright. Dak To is right here, and I was wrong. I just checked the dates. The Dak Mot Lop one that we looked at, the first one, the first PDF version, was printed in 1968. So Max was 1965. The one that I've been referencing is 68. This Dak To map is this is the one you're going to find on the archive, is printed as of 1970. So it's a little bit later. And of course Max, we'll see here in a second, is 1965 as well. And here you can see that Department of Defense seal that is not on either of those 1965 versions. There's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Army Map Service seal, but not anything. And you can see over here, since we're looking, this U.S. Army Corps of Engineers U.S. Army Topographic Command. So that was the name switch from Army Map Service to 1968, and in 1968 became the U.S. Army Topographic Command. It changed names a whole bunch of other times between then and now. I think it's like the National Geospatial Agency or something like that. So, and again, this is just the This is not Mac's version. This is what you would have if you went to the archive and downloaded it. So let's check out Mac's version. So again, not quite as stained, probably because it didn't get out and used as much, but definitely heavily folded, a little bit more damage. You see this kind of tearing and folding occurring up to this one side. Um, there's a little bit of tear and fold there, but still relatively amazing condition. I think one of the coolest things about these maps, these old maps of Macs, is when you take them out of the bag, you can feel the grit, the 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 red dirt of the Central Highlands. It's still on there. Like you can just feel it kind of encrusted in these documents. And so it really brings kind of you in touch with the men that served at that time, and knowing that Mac served at the same time as my wife's uncle. I mean, it really is kind of reaching back into the past and touching a little bit of family history, even though it's not directly related. It's not like, I don't think that my wife's uncle Donald had these in his hands at any point, but they existed in Vietnam at the same time he did, for sure. Um, okay, so that's Dak To. I'm going to stop with Dak To, and we're going to look back at Dak Mot Lop because I want to show you those patrol routes, tell you a little bit more about Mac, show you some pictures, and then we're going to be done. All right, so we're back at the Dak Mot Lop map sheet, and you can see these pen marks. We're going to zoom in on a couple of them and do it chronologically based on when I think that Mac was in these locations making these marks. And so the first place that they went is again, the company was on Hill 990, which is located about right here on May 30th, and they nearly got overrun, and they lost 6 killed in action. There was another man from the mortar platoon that was killed, and then so 7 total, and they lost like 50 guys wounded. And so after that battle, they were moved back to Dak To, next map sheet over, to kind of take care of their wounded and start to rebuild their strength again. So they were there from basically June 1st. June 2nd is about, I think June 2nd is when they finished getting pulled off the hill, till about the 3rd to the 5th. The log is a little bit sketchy as far as where they went, but at some point they made their way up to this fire support base 25, which, if you think Dak To is to the east, you got Highway 512, and I'll zoom in a little. So Firebase 25 was actually located right here at Hill 849. And now this was the site of a major battle back in January of 68. I'm sure I'll do a video about that at some point. But we're talking about right now, it's now June of 1968. Delta Company gets sent there, and it looks like at some point Mac was either leading a patrol or on a patrol to go check out these lowlands in between the firebase and the Dak Poco River. This exact ground was covered by Delta Company, maybe not in this path, but definitely in this ground, back in February of 68 after the big battle. They took a long patrol out here. It was joint Delta and Alpha Company. So it's kind of interesting when I see things like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, there were probably guys in that they had been on this exact same ground before. So we know that's where Mac was. We know that he obviously went out on a patrol and explored a little bit of this area looking for the MVA. So that's where the Delta Company was, right here, Firebase 25, until June 14th. And then June 14th hits, and they are sent to, they're airlifted to Fire Support Base 3, which is located way down here at the Dak Poco River Bridge. And now this is a really common spot. A lot of guys that were in the battalion at this time remember coming here and being on duty for usually 2-3 weeks at a time because it was considered a little bit lighter duty. There was less activity, less enemy activity here. It was not as steep a terrain, and so they would send a platoon, sometimes a company. At this point, Delta Company was sent here, but their numbers were probably low because they had lost 50 guys, so they were probably running about a half company strength, so maybe 60 to 80 guys as opposed to 110. And you can see that at some point Mac ran at least 2 patrols out of here, and I think what we have is one of them started and made this big loop, and I guess crossed the river, which it seems odd to me. I know they cross the river a lot, and at times it could be low if it wasn't the rainy season, but cross the river, come back down, cross the river again. And maybe there was a little natural ford there. You just don't know with these maps. And then another little triangle patrol here. And there's a couple other little notes, and I don't know what they mean. 5011, 5010. Those are not height. I don't know what they are. So if you have any hints, if you're watching this and you're like, I was in the military in Vietnam, I remember what those meant in relation to these, to this patrol route, let me know, please. So Mac was here. These are his pencil marks. He made them. They were there from, I'm looking at my notes here, from June 14th until June 26th is when Delta Company was here. And then in June 26th, they get airlifted back to, I'll zoom out a little just so you can get the distance here. They get airlifted, basically they swap out. Delta goes to Hill 990, Alpha Company goes from 990 to the Doc Poco River Bridge site. So this is 990, and this is the site of that horrible battle on May 30th, Memorial Day of 1968. So Delta Company ends up back here on 990, and you can see there's not just these kind of well-defined patrol routes, but if you really can get close, I mean, I can get you kind of close, but if you have this map in front of you, there's a lot where it looks like there's an old route and maybe it's been erased or rubbed off. You can see where he wrote in the grid designators. I mean this would be the northings. So you got 25, 26, and you can see he's written them in a little bit. And that's so if he's got this folded, and you can see there's a fold here and a fold here. So if he's got this folded to about this big in his pocket, that's all he needs. He doesn't need to unfold it to figure out what grid line he's on, because he need to recall back with his grid point at some point. I know that looks like 65, but it's not. It's 25. You can kind of get in, see the two. And there's like an old route here with these old X's, and I don't know what any of that means, other than these are definitely old patrol routes. So Delta Company spends quite a bit of July there, and then they get airlifted to Firebase 29, which is just to the southeast, located right here on Hill. It's 824, but it's pretty, the scan is accurate. The map has been rubbed pretty raw right there. So you can see lots of different patrols, and this would make sense because in the beginning of this, he was not senior, Mac wasn't, so he probably wasn't running those patrols. He was probably assistant team leader, maybe a team leader as opposed to a squad leader. Maybe he was running a patrol. But now he's definitely more senior. This is going to be July. He's 10 months into his tour, so he is one of the most senior guys in the company, especially with everything that happened to them in May. They lost a ton of guys, so he's definitely running these patrols. So that is really what I want to show you, how amazing these maps are. They've got the handwritten, patrol marks on them. You can even see this is an interesting patrol here. I'm not sure where it starts. Actually, no, I am sure where it starts. It leaves the fire base. They come down into this gully, up and over this ridge, over to Hill 805 and back. And so this was a multiple day patrol. This was not one. There was a night defensive position set up, at least one somewhere around there. And again, I have not found the log that corresponds with that trail or that patrol route, but I will. I mean, this hill right here has a lot of meaning to the unit anyway, because in August of '68, Delta Company was back on Firebase 29, and Alpha Company came in here and lost a lot of men right here on this hilltop. And that is a whole other video, a whole other story that I will get to at some point. So that is the map. Again, the key pieces of this map, for reference, I'm going to show you some pictures and I'm going to refer back to them, is this Firebase 3, which is the bridge. Firebase 25, I'm not going to mention. Probably not. And then Hill 990 and Firebase 29 right here and right here. I know it's zoomed way out, so it's hard to see, but those are kind of the critical pieces that I'm going to show you. And so the first picture is of Mac. You know, he's a Texan through and through. His daughter Shannon just thought the world of him, still thinks the world of him. I really wish I could have met the guy. Yeah, this was taken on Dak To when he was part of the supply element. That says April '68 is what the picture says that it was developed in, which means it was probably taken in March. And you can see here's Mac. He's got his combat infantryman badge proudly displayed on his hat. He's got this jungle hat on. He's sitting on a bunker on the perimeter of Dak To, probably. He's got a handheld radio here. Looks like another M16 in the background. So that's Mac. Larry Mac McGee, born in 1944, served in Vietnam 66, 67, lived in Texas, as far as I know, almost his entire life, except for the times he was in the military, and he passed away in 2010. So next picture this is the bridge. This is the Dak Poco Bridge that I showed you. It's actually, you can still see it on this background map. It's right here. And there was concertina wire. You can a little bit see it through, strung on both sides to try and keep the NVA sappers out. And this is one of Mac's pictures. So we know this picture was taken in between June 14th to June 26th of 1968. At some point during that span is when this picture was taken. And so the next picture we got is Mac at that firebase. I'm moderately certain, one, because it kind of, the terrain, well, definitely the terrain fits in. You can kind of see a little sliver of, I think, river right here, kind of lowlands. The other places that Mac served where he took pictures, they were usually up high. It wasn't much higher than them where he took the pictures. So you see here, man in the radio. Got the nice canteen cup with the stand right there. Looks like a helmet there, and a few bunkers out on the perimeter. So I'm not sure which side of the river this was on. I'd like to try and figure that out too. I just haven't yet. So the next picture is Mac getting ready to go on one of those patrols that very likely could be marked out on this map. Who knows? Maybe that's a stretch, but I think it might be. And you can see he's got his ruck on. This is quite the load. He's got some extra canteen, extra water in a canteen, extra ammo. He even got his coffee pot up here. So I think this might have been an overnight patrol. Pretty loaded down. Of course, then he's got his radio as well. Now this picture, I believe, after, if you remember, they went from Firebase 3 to Hill 990 and then eventually to Firebase 29. I believe the stamp says July of '68. They were there at 29 pretty much all of July. I think this is Firebase 29. I've seen some other pictures of Firebase 29. It seems to kind of match. You can see an aiming stick here for an artillery position or a mortar position. A couple of guys. I have not identified either one of these guys. And of course, the central figure or point of the picture is this Chinook helicopter. bringing in a load of something, or possibly taking a load out, but more than likely bringing in a load of something. And the last picture is, I think, Hill 990. Um, and the reason I think that is because Hill 990 was not developed into a proper fire base like what we saw here. I call this uh, a proper fire base, meaning bunkers completely clear, lots of bunkers. You can tell the difference between a very well developed fire base and something like this, which is more of a position. And Hill 990 had this reputation when the 3rd of the 12th guys there as being pretty rough. It wasn't a fire base yet. It eventually became a fire base. They continued to clear, and eventually was given the designator Fire Support Base 32. But the guys just remember it as Hill 990. And so this is a Huey landing, delivering some supplies, or guys. Actually, it looks like it's full of maybe ammo, wooden ammo boxes. And you can see bunkers. There's an above ground tent here, but look at this. There's a bunker right there to go scramble in if needed. So a little bit about Mac, a lot about his pictures. I'm really thankful that Shannon trusted me to take these maps of her dad's into my possession and get these scans made, because now even if I don't have the physical record, I'm always going to have this authentic red dirt Central Highlands stained map sheet to remember Mac by, and to remember all the guys that served in the 3rd of the 12th, and all the things that they did in 67 and 68 when they were on this map sheet fighting in the Vietnam War. As always, my name's Mark. I am thankful. I've got some patrons to thank. I started a Patreon page. For those of you that are interested, feel free to go and sign up as patrons. There's no pressure to do that. I hope you enjoy what I'm putting together. But I got some patrons to thank. First is Jack Anderson. He was my first one. I gave him a shout out in the last one, but I'm going to give him another shout out. Jack, thank you for trusting me and supporting me. And then I have 2 new patrons sign up since my last video. Dion Mountain, who is also a Delta Company 3rd of the 12th veteran. And I'm thankful. I've met Dion. He's a great guy. And Dion and Jack actually served at about the same time. And so thank you, Dion, for your support. And then Kelly Panetta signed up as well. So I'll give her a shout out. And Kelly is a dear daughter of Mike Panetta, who served with my uncle in Vietnam, and knew him, remembers him. They spent time together, and so Kelly and I have met a couple of times now, and she's wonderful. And so thank you very much, Kelly, for the support. Thanks again, all of you. Again, visit my Patreon page if you want to. This will be there. It'll eventually make its way to YouTube. If you want to follow it, if you got suggestions, I'm not great at this. I'm just kind of doing what I have, what I'm able to do, and I do want to improve. If you know of some technology that would make it easier, this is not something this is not my full-time job. I have a family that I have to spend a lot of time with, so this is the easiest kind of platform for me. Just making these little videos. Have a great day. Braves always first.